Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Business Scale Up podcast. We're happy to have you here with us. Today we're going to be talking, over the past number of episodes, we've covered lots of different subjects, but one of the subjects we haven't covered is one we're going to cover today, and that is one of coaching, and more specifically, holistic coaching. What is that? I hear you cry. Well, to explain all, we're lucky to have with us the most excellent Andrea from Andrea Morrison Coaching. Andrea, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So, no, thanks for agreeing to do this. It's I know it's out of your way and it's much appreciated. So, I suppose to kick it all off then, who are you? I always go back to Cilla Black in these things and I've no idea why, but do you remember Blind Date?
I do.
Do you remember, what's your name, where'd you come from?
Yeah.
For some reason, my mind always reverts to Cilla Black, and I can't tell you why I do that, but it just does. So what are your kind of experiences to lead you to where you are today? So you are Andrea Morrison Coaching. So how was Andrea Morrison Coaching, how was it born?
Oh, how did it come about? So we've only got 10 minutes or so, haven't we? So
As
I can't fit it all with this. Yeah. So Andrea Morrison Coaching was born out of my own personal circumstances, my own personal journey. It wasn't ever anything I set out to do.
Okay.
My career of choice, if you like, was a lawyer. I was an employment law barrister for 10 years.
An employment law barrister?
Yeah.
Niche.
Yeah, very niche. And had a really successful practice, practiced up here in the Northeast, although my practice was all over the UK. And probably about 12 years ago now, I completely burnt out. So I've been practicing for about 10 years. I had a very small family, was doing very similar to a lot of my clients that I see, trying to juggle 7,562 things all at once, and really having 3 small children under the age of 4, and having a UK-wide practice was not
too much.
Really, yeah, it was just a little bit nuts, really. But what happened was I burnt myself out, both physically and also emotionally.
Oh, really?
And that was a really kind of interesting point, really, because I could put myself back together, if you like, physically, just with rest and looking after myself. But it really enabled me to look at, well, what actually caused this burnout? What drove me to get to that particular point? And what I saw was I had a lot of narratives that really got in my way, a lot of invisible stuff, as I call it. There was a lot of self-doubt, lack of confidence, a lot of stress, worry, overwhelm. And it was like, I had that voice in my head going at 100 miles an hour all the time, sort of telling me who I was, how things were going to be, what people were thinking, what was going to happen in the future, all of that. And what I saw was that was what was causing how I was feeling in myself. And it was also getting in the way of my own success as a lawyer previously, although I didn't want to go back to that particular career.
You didn't?
No.
Had enough?
I'd had enough of that.
Understandable.
Yeah. And so what I really got very fascinated about was, well, how do we really reach our potential? How do we get out of our own way? How can we kind of drive our mind, if you like, in a way that enables us to experience life balance and enjoy life, but also achieve the things that we want to do and be the best that we can be at the stuff that we do? And that led me on a completely different journey.
Very different from employment law.
Absolutely, into the whole world of psychology and how our mind really works. And I've been really fortunate to train with some incredible teachers over the last number of years. Been over to America, Salt Spring Island over in Canada,
wow.
And really get to really understand how as human beings we create our experience, so that how we can create a good experience that serves us in the best way.
Do you feel like you understand the human nature more now than you did before all this happened to you?
Oh, absolutely, 100%.
Is that through study? And how have you kind of come to that realization that human nature is not what you thought it was?
Well, I think the word there is realization. I think there's almost like a process, and it starts with an intellectual understanding, if you like, and then a process of you seeing it for yourself.
Right.
So really kind of understanding, how thought creates our reality, and how we can choose different thoughts is something that you can only really see internally for yourself. You can be pointed towards it and you can understand it kind of theoretically, but you have to have that kind of deeper personal realization.
Do you have to see it in order for it to be real? I know that sounds like a silly question, but to realize something exists or is not what it was, you have to see it for yourself first. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. I think as well as somebody who coaches in this, it's so important for the coach to have seen it before they share it, because otherwise you're just sharing theory. Whereas I think once you've seen something for yourself, you're able to explain it in a way that really suits the person that you're sharing it with.
Yeah, makes sense. So you've gone from employment law into coaching.
Yeah.
So your past experiences, then, would you say they have shaped the way you look at coaching now? Because there are different sorts of coaching, and is it fair to say that you're not mainstream? Is that fair?
Yeah, I would say.
Would you
that's
sit
fair.
a little bit on the outside of what is traditional business coaching?
Yes, absolutely. It's a completely different approach to business coaching, but one that I think is absolutely key. In fact, I would say it's like the missing piece when it comes to business coaching, because you can coach somebody to come up with strategies or plans, or all the different things that form business coaching, all the different models that are out there, and you can follow a particular model, but actually enabling that person to put that into practice and have the confidence to take the opportunities or put a plan into action, do the things that they need to do. That stuff is absolutely crucial, and it's magic. It makes the difference between a business that grows or a business that just stays where it is. And it's often overlooked, and you might hear words like accountability, but it's really hard to make somebody do something that they don't want to do.
Yes, it is.
And actually, I get really curious when somebody doesn't do what they say they want to do, because often it's because they feel they should do it, and they're not doing it because they actually really want to do it.
Really?
Yeah, because if it's something we want to do, then generally we do it.
Yeah, that's true. Is that where the holistic bit comes in then? Because like normal coaching looks at business, like I said, strategies and stuff, but your approach is a little bit more human-centric.
Absolutely.
And is that the holistic approach that you kind of take?
Absolutely, and that's where the kind of the transformation happens, really, because you can't take the person out of the business. And again, that's often overlooked. That if somebody has some ideas about who they are that might, they might have been carrying for a number of years, or, they're in a particular relationship, or they've got wayward teenagers, or whatever it is that is creating that mental load, it's that mental load that's going to get in the way of them taking the action that they need to take. So the understanding that I kind of share about our psychology, it doesn't really matter what we're talking about. We can be talking about their business, we can be talking about their wayward teenagers or their partner or whatever. Once they've seen it in one aspect of their life, they can then apply it to any aspect of their life.
Wow.
Because, it's like learning to drive a car. Once you've turned right in one street, you can turn right in any street. It doesn't matter. And this applies to the same thing here. So taking a more holistic nature enables somebody to really consider the whole of their mental load, the whole of that invisible stuff that's getting in their way, which enables them to clear their mind. And as soon as they've got a clearer mind, they can take more action and take those opportunities they've been meaning to take, and maybe just enjoy their business a little bit more than they have been.
Would you say that sometimes barriers to success are not necessarily the business's fault, in that it's not the economy necessarily, or it might not be a supply chain, but it is actually a person, in that a human being has barriers invisible, and once those barriers are removed, the sky's the limit. Is that am I overselling that slightly?
I think it may be a little bit more complicated than that. I think there are definitely external barriers. However, when we have a clearer state of mind and we have less of those unhelpful narratives going on, then we're more able to find workarounds for some of those barriers, or we may be able to be more likely to negotiate some of those barriers in a better way. Some of them are outside of our control completely. It may be that we might have to get involved in, I don't know, steering groups or something like that. But actually having more of a clearer mind means that we may then be more likely to get involved in that change. And I've seen that myself. So I'm involved in different conversations with, say, for the Federation of Small Businesses. And I've done that because I'm now a more confident, self-assured. I don't have those narratives anymore. I'm quite happy to share my opinions, if you like, whereas perhaps 10, 15 years ago, I wouldn't have been. And so those are opportunities that have presented themselves, and I've been able to overcome those barriers. But I don't think it's, work on your mindset and the world is your oyster. I think work on your mindset and there are more opportunities out there than perhaps you thought there were before.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And maybe you might want to take on some of those bigger barriers and have those tricky conversations when you feel more confident about yourself. But yeah.
So what are we talked about barriers? What are the more common barriers that you've come across in your time doing this that perhaps people listening or watching might be able to identify with?
I would say the main barriers that I find are lack of confidence, self-doubt. We talk about imposter syndrome a lot.
I didn't even know what imposter syndrome was till a few years ago.
Really?
Now I see it everywhere.
Yeah, I think as well, especially kind of coming out of the pandemic, I think people are more reluctant to put themselves forward. We've spent quite a lot of time quite isolated, and people don't have that very ready, up-to-date experience of themselves doing stuff that would be outside of their comfort zone or what they would term to be their comfort zone. And so we're almost kind of relearning how to take opportunities, where we've become very risk averse, and that in many ways can hold our businesses back. So that's another invisible barrier where we're worried about history repeating itself, doing things that are going to put our businesses or our livelihoods in jeopardy. And so we don't want to take those steps. So that would be another one. Stress is the highest levels that I've ever seen.
Really? Is that after COVID?
Particularly after COVID.
Why do you think that is then? What's happened there to elevate our stress levels after COVID? Because you'd think after COVID we'd be all right now, wouldn't we? But we're not.
No, I think there have been so many external factors. Obviously, we've had COVID, we've had Brexit, we've had cost of living crisis, cost of doing business crisis. Prices are going up. People are very unsure about the future. And as human beings, we have this incredible ability to imagine the scariest future possible. And I don't mean to say that flippantly, but we can run ourselves 6 months ahead, and we can lose our business, we can not pay our staff, and and then we make a decision based on that today, based on what we think is going to happen in the future. And so we do get very stressed about what the future holds, and it's completely understandable, and there's absolutely no judgment there, but it can be very difficult to live with, and it has an impact on people's health as well.
So yeah, it's a question of planning for the worst and then forgetting to hope for the best. It's just planning for the worst. As we noticed that when the cost of living was coming about during the same time as Russia invaded, and all that kind of horrendous few months that we had, where I was aware of businesses planning for the worst 6 months down the line and shutting because they were expecting things to go really, really pear-shaped, which ultimately they didn't. And that's a prime example of exactly what you just said. They planned for the worst and shut. They closed shop and they gave up, and people lost their jobs because of the fear that something was going to happen before it happened, which I found a bit of an eye-opener, really.
Yeah, and
worrying.
It is, and it's understandable, and but it's quite commonplace. I do see a lot of it, and It's often because we forget that actually human beings are really good at figuring stuff out. And we kind of project ourselves into the future, and we forget that actually we're really good at problem solving and working out solutions and all of that kind of stuff. So what we see is people projecting themselves into the future, fearing the worst, thinking there is no other option, there's nothing will happen, everything will stay the same between now and 6 months, which of course invariably it doesn't. Things always change.
Always.
And then we're making a decision based on what we think might happen.
So what would you say to someone who was thinking about wanting to engage with someone such as yourself? What advice would you give them listening or watching this today?
I would say come and have a talk with me, and see if it's an approach that is right for you. But have those conversations, reach out. Particularly if you are struggling, know that you're not alone. That actually there are a lot of people who feel very similar to you right now.
There can be some comfort in that.
Absolutely. I mean, I do a number of different group programs, and actually one of the first things we do is share experience, and I do that for a very specific reason, is because everybody's shoulders go down 6 inches. They realise that they're not alone.
Yeah, that's healing in itself sometimes.
Absolutely, and really powerful to know that. It's nothing that you've done. It's nothing you could have perhaps avoided. There's no judgment there. It is just where you are right now, and along with a lot of other people. So do reach out to, either myself or a coach that you might know. Mostly coaches will do a free initial consultation to make sure that you are right for them and they're right for you, and the approach is right. So make use of that. And find that safe space, because what I found over the last sort of 3 years, and what's needed in business, is that provision of a safe space, so that you can really offload and get out of all that stuff that's in your head with somebody that's not going to judge you, so that you can find the way forward that is right for you, and find that clarity and find that confidence.
Amazing. That about wraps up part 1 of this episode. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again in part 2.